Dear brothers and sisters, Father Mark Link, Jesuit, tells the story of a newly commissioned colonel who had just moved into his new assignment and his office. And a few moments later, a private soldier entered with a toolbox. The conceited colonel wanted to impress the private young soldier. So he said to him, "Just a minute, soldier. I have an important phone call to answer. It came as you knocked at the door." The colonel took up the phone which was on his table, punched in a few numbers, and few moments later said very pompously, "Is that you, General? How can I help you?" And there was a brief pause, and the colonel concluded with, "Sure, General, that's no problem. I'll phone Washington and tell the president myself." And then he hung up. Then he turned to the private and said, "What can I do for you, soldier?" The private shuffled his feet and said, "Oh, just a little thing, sir. I was sent to hook up your telephone." He had to repair the telephone. Then he stifled a laugh and walked out, leaving the colonel all flushed and full of embarrassment. Now the boastful colonel was making a phone call on a dead telephone. And that was ludicrous. He even dared to make a fake conversation. And that is to the president. St. Francis de Sales says, "He who stays not in his littleness loses his greatness." In today's gospel reading, we hear the parable told by Jesus. There are two categories of men. The Pharisees believed that they, by their own merits, were acceptable to God. And it should be stressed that Jesus did not criticize all Pharisees, but only those who trusted in their own merits and manipulated God. Jesus had high praise for Nicodemus, the Pharisee who belonged to a pious movement. While the tax collector was part of the most hated profession. And both men go to offer their prayers to God. Now in his prayer, the Pharisee compares himself to all others. He assumes a position of confidence as he stands and prays. And in the Jewish culture, prayer was either silent or uttered in a low voice. Vocal prayer was acceptable, though praying too loudly was considered rude. In book of Samuel in the Old Testament, you have Hannah is an example, praying aloud but quietly. So the Pharisee is so contained with self-righteousness that he compares himself to variety of unrighteous people, violators of the commandments. And then he refers to the tax collector, makes a judgment on him. Each one of us are created by God. God is our only judge. No one can judge us here on earth with regard to God matters. So part of the reason for the Pharisee to pray comparing to others was his confidence in his own merits. And the religious activity is to either manipulate God or to get what he wanted. And so two practices are singled out here. One is fasting and the other one is giving tithes. Fasting they had to do only on the Day of Atonement. But this Pharisee says, Lord, I fast twice a week. That is compared to Moses going on Mount Sinai and coming down on Mondays and Thursdays. Both the days are convenient to divide the week. And what a fast involved? Fast involved in having bread and water. So traditional reason for fasting on Monday and Thursday was that these days, I told you, Moses went up to Mount Sinai and came down. That's one of the reasons. And the other reason, simply because the week was divided into nicely. Now regarding tithing, they had to give to the church a tenth of their earnings or produce. So the grower here had already given the tithe for certain produce required by the law. But these Pharisees, they tithe on food, on herbs, which are not required by the law, and herbs, the expenditure is minimum, not significant. So this man, he is faithful in giving to God a tenth of what he earns, and on this basis he asserts his superiority over the people. He's gone beyond the call of duty, and he said God should be impressed with his record of service. And so Jesus considers this offensive. Then you have the tax collector, complete contrast to the Pharisee. He remains far off at the end of the church, end of the temple. He does not go into the temple, a sign of timidity and humility. And so from there he prays to God. He does not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beats his breast as a sign of contrition. And the tone of his request different from that of the Pharisee. There's no self-confidence. It's the prayer of a penitent, a sinner, asking to be forgiven, and wants to repent. And the prayer asks to show mercy from God through atoning forgiveness. And he refers himself to as a sinner. He makes no comparison to others, unlike the Pharisee. He's concerned only with his spiritual health. And he wants God's mercy. And Jesus endorses this tax collector's attitude. And if you see, in general, we have these two types of attitudes in us. And you will be saying, you'll be going on sinning if you have the attitude of Pharisee, sin of pride, selfishness. And you'll say, I feel very proud. I don't like others. And so people don't speak to me. I have no friends. Again, I put down others. I only want to be rich. And for this remedy is be humble and know that each one of us is created by God in His image. All are important. All are beloved children of God. And the other way around, the poor sinner, he says, sorry, Lord, please forgive me. Give me the kingdom of heaven. Take me there with you in heaven. And then, so the humility we find in the heartwarming story. A man goes past his granddaughter's bedroom, And he was pleased to see her kneeling down and praying to God, saying her night prayers. So he stopped to listen to what she was saying and found, after listening, she was merely reciting the alphabets, A, B, C, D, X, Y, Z. And so he was astonished. He went in and asked her, "Honey, what on earth are you saying to God?" She says, "Granddad, today I have so many things to ask God. I don't know how to ask Him. So I recited the alphabets so God can put them together because He knows what I am thinking." Simplicity and disarming humility. A famous preacher, Philip Brooks, says, "A prayer in its simplest definition is merely a wish made turned heavenward. We do our best, and God will unfailingly do the rest."